So the first one will be the town of Griffith, which is it's the Katy Marsh ditch diversion sewer intake. This was built as a federal flood control project, but not our federal flood control project. And very much like our federal flood control project, there was no funding source to deal with the ongoing operation and maintenance of it. So this has a, I guess, more direct and some indirect impact on our system and the way it was designed. And I think Andy here, Andy Rabb, will be here to discuss that, and he will go through his presentation and we'll leave it at that.
All right, everything's all set up. You guys are teched up. Please introduce yourself and have at it, gentlemen.
All right, I'm Andy Rabb with the town of Griffith. This is Dennis Benoli, who's our engineer from HRC Engineering. So we thank you for your time, and I know your time is valuable, so we'll try to go through this as quickly as can. Before I get to Dennis and the quick presentation, I've been on board for Griffith just for about 7 or 8 months. I'm the public works director. So when I walked into one of the first things I looked at was the failing raker in the system, the problem we're having with cleaning over at the ditch. I saw guys during the June rain events. Guy got hurt with a rotor cuff injury trying to get debris out of there. Another guy hurt his back. Another guy fell into the water. It's an extreme safety hazard, especially during heavy rain events. We're trying to use backhoes and other equipment that's caused a lot of damage. And it's becoming a big problem. We had flooding at the big rain event in June where we had almost 9 inches of rain. We'll have some pictures that'll show a little bit of that. But it's an extreme safety hazard for our associates. And trying to do it with a backhoe and other ways just doesn't work. So that's why we're here today to ask for your help with that. That being said, we'll get to the presentation, and Dennis, if you can go through that, please.
Okay, I'm just gonna give you a little background on the overall lay of the land. You guys probably know a lot more about this project than we do. But, you know, this is a 10-foot diameter short storm sewer. It provides a shortcut from the Katy Marsh ditch to the Little Cal River, lowers the hydraulic grade line. It basically allows all that flow from Griffith in the southeast to go north and east without having to go all the way over to the Heart Ditch. This is basically a map showing that the shortcut versus the yellow line. It's about a little over a mile long versus going about 5.5 miles. So this has a significant effect on the hydraulic grade line at the Little Cal River where the Heart Ditch intersects, as you probably all understand from this in the past. The chronology of the problems that the town has had in 2010, the sewer and intake were and then about a year later, the Corps installed this mechanical traveling rake, which you see there. It's that long thing with the boom. And in 2012 and 2014, the town had problems with this. And there was a variety of issues of why this thing did not work properly that I found out in the course of doing this study. And I don't think we want to go through all that. But long story short is that it doesn't work. They've had numerous problems with it. And since about 2014, the town has basically given up on trying to keep this thing operational. Went back to a manual raking with a backhoe that was parked on the street behind this trash rack. Well, needless to say, that plastic or fiberglass rack that was originally installed didn't last very long with that kind of activity. And so it basically, the original rack was replaced with a very robust metal galvanized steel rack, and it's still in place and it's still very robust, very and can withstand a lot of shock. And it's very well engineered, well designed for its purpose. But with the manual raking, as Andy alluded to here earlier, there's high velocity currents into the sewer because this is built right at a weir. So that there's about a 10-foot drop behind the weir, and so water rushes through there. And in the past, some of the guys have had to actually stand in front of the rake to pull large objects away from the front of the rack during rainstorms. It becomes very tricky, and it's a safety issue. And I don't know if you want to say something more about that.
I don't have a picture of it, but guys, when the water's to the top of the bridge and it's 5 feet plus deep in a current, guys were in waders trying to get things out of there, getting pushed, and it was just so unsafe. I had to stop the practice the minute I saw it. And then we're back to trying to do this, and then the guy hurt his rotator cuff, and they're trying to ropes and buckets and rakes, and I got a couple pictures, but unfortunately I don't have a bunch of them. So it's just an extreme problem, and it's just not safe. And we know it's valuable. It's a great thing that was done to create that waterway to help the flooding, but we got to be able to keep it. We got to be able to keep it clear. And the rake just never worked. It was rebuilt 3 different times, sent back to the manufacturer. It just doesn't work. That is one of the options you would have seen that we presented. We could try to fix it again. There's just not a lot of confidence. Why it's the lowest cost, there's just not a lot of confidence that will continue to work. And with the solution that you've got, go ahead and go with that.
And needless to say, when they can't rake it fast enough, it backs up on the street, as you can see from that last picture, very rapidly, and it's starting to flood the streets. This is just some of the costs that have been incurred because of the inadequate original design. Is that the rack was replaced at a cost of about $300,000 in 2019 thereabouts. And then the town has been incurring additional costs because of having this backhoe available on demand to continue to rake clean the rack during storms. For a while, it was actually parked out there, but it's actually usually trucked in when needed. So that's what the costs that have been being incurred are. This is a picture of the backhoe cleaning the rack. Because of the high velocities of the flow going through this rack, it actually pulls the material down onto the rack. So that's part of the reason why this manual raking it wasn't really well thought out to begin with. It's just too much force for a couple guys to pull a large debris up.
Just out of curiosity, who designed this again?
This was the Army Corps.
Oh, thank you.
Mhm.
So we did a study, and we looked at 3 different alternatives. And in the course of looking at that mechanical rack, we found out that the original design, and I talked to the manufacturer of this rake, and they had a lot of problems. And part of the problem that they had with the original design engineer is that the rack was designed at a different angle than what their boom operates at. So as you rake this thing up the slope, the boom angle had to continually change. Well, that turned out to be a radically different departure from what they normally do. They normally design the boom to work on the same plane so it doesn't have to change its angle as it breaks up the slope. So we would have to do some significant changes to the existing rack to make that work. And then that alternative, which is the far left there, is roughly we determined about $660,000. But there's 2 problems with selecting that alternative. One is you still only have 1 machine to clean 5 racks. So the 1 machine goes down, during a storm, you're still stuck with the same situation you are today. You have no redundancy. Both of those other 2 alternatives that we looked at puts an independent machine on each rack. So we've got 5 times the redundancy, if you will, or 4 times the redundancy if the first one goes out. But basically, we looked at 2 different alternatives. The middle one there, which is the back clean screen, is not a very good engineering solution, in my opinion, because it's raking up the back of the screen, and because of the clearance involved, it still involves rearranging, repositioning this rack that's already out there drastically. The last version only requires a very minor adjustment of that rack angle to fit the machine that we've proposed, which is basically a track machine. And I've got some pictures of it here on some of the following pages. This is a better view of how that track machine would work. This is a machine that the company that we've been talking to provide this has provided this type of machine on numerous dam installations where the rack is usually a little steeper and goes down into the water. This is a little different because we're cleaning the rack right at the crest of a weir. And the weir is there for hydraulic purposes, basically to keep the water in the ditch. We don't want it all draining into the sewer and all going that way, because then we probably pull heart ditch backwards. But that's an engineering issue that I don't know if we have time to get into. But the other things we have to do to accommodate this, we have to upgrade the power to 480 volt 3-phase. We have to provide site security fencing with this kind of machine working out there. There's no security fencing right there today. So we obviously got to keep kids and innocent bystanders from accidentally walking over there when this thing starts up. And then we got a conveyor and a commercial dumpster. This is a view of the machine that we're proposing. This is a dam installation. This would be very similar to what we're proposing here. The beauty of this machine is that we can put it on the existing rack. It's basically independent of that rack. And since there's already a very robust rack there, those bars are roughly 6 inches high and half an inch diameter, half an inch wide. So they're very hefty steel rack. This is a breakdown of the cost opinion of the recommended alternative, the manufacturer's equipment, and we've had numerous discussions with them. So this is a good number here for 5 machines plus a conveyor and a control panel and level sensors to basically make this whole thing operational. The rest of these costs are electrical. We've got level sensors and control wiring that are needed because you've got to sense when the level is coming up, because then it would turn the rakes on and have them start raking. Fencing and security. The power upgrade, we had some back and forth with NIPSCO to determine their costs and then we have to, because we're changing the site voltage, we have to put some transformers in there to accommodate all the existing site lighting. We've got street modifications to accommodate the dumpster. We got to shift the curbing around a little bit to accommodate this dumpster we're going to put on site, and a dumpster pad. And then this mechanical equipment installation will be basically the mechanical contractor that installs that equipment on the top line. And then engineering, design, and construction, I've got 15% in there as just sort of a placeholder. We have not submitted a proposal or anything to the town yet to firm that number up, but it would be in that range or perhaps less. And then contingencies, we put a 10% contingency. One of the questions that was posed originally was that, well, how firm is this number? We don't have hard bids, we don't have hard plans and specs, but that would be the next step to get to this hard number of 1.76 million. So I think that's pretty much it. If you want to go back to the look at the breakdown.
Oh, we'll go back on pretty much a lot of this. So
Okay.
Let's bring it to the board as far as questions on this particular project. Who wants to go first? Okay, Mr. Whitaker.
Just very briefly, back to your slide on, let's see. So we didn't have to redact any costs from the previous company that actually did the work. We didn't get any compensation or anything. I'm assuming the fact regarding the fact that it was only service for less than 4 years.
So did we get money back from the original manufacturer of the rake?
Yeah, I think it was a credit or.
No, that was,
Did they say that they were?
that was back in that was back over 10 years ago.
Okay,
And then, so when we hit, that's the proposal one, when we asked them to revisit
Mhm.
and give us a cost to fix and update it today. They claimed they were giving us this great price to try to make it right from when it was wrong back then.
Okay.
But no, we haven't got any
okay,
compensation. We had to pay to ship it to them back when it was in 2012 and then bring it back. And so,
okay.
no.
The slide we had, that may be at the bottom right picture. The title of the other, that's it. Okay, maybe it's on the next page.
Yeah, this is
So,
the
yeah,
recommended
so
alternative.
so the existing one is 57.1, I believe, that was in the packet, and I think you're proposing like a 30-degree angle. For the, what would it would be for to ride from what, east to west? So your angle is going to change from 57 down to 30 in order to accommodate not being caught up.
Well, the existing angle is pretty much what it is there on the far right
Okay,
today.
right.
That's pretty close to the existing angle. We got to change it slightly. We may have to change it 1 or 2 degrees just because there's some obstacles at the very top. So to have it rake cleanly up, and then it's got to rake up and go onto a plate and then drop onto something. So we have to make it clear that. So we have to do a slight change. And as you can see, that's probably the least change of all 3. The other 2 have to be much steeper to work.
Okay,
And that translates into cost, additional cost to move all that heavy structural steel around.
okay. The last question I have for now is, you said a lot of dam projects use that type of a design. Anything locally that we might be able to envision seeing that may be comparable?
I don't know, I'd have to quiz the manufacturer on that one. Most of the dam projects that they've done are down in the New Orleans area, big dams and out west. So I can find out. Actually, this type of machine on the far right it is actually used in wastewater treatment plants a lot too, work for the same purpose, raking stormwater screens and sanitary screens. And there's actually one that was just recently put in, I worked on over at the Hammond Sanitary District. So,
Okay.
so that's pretty local.
Close enough, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess-
I'll jump on that question just as an aside with regards to other locations where this rack system or rake cleaning system has worked. If it's stormwater plants, just on where they've done 5 like this and how that activity would relate to what you're going to anticipate at this location.
Okay, I can get you some references.
And then the other thing before I let it for these other guys, just for me, an overall site plan of that location and where you're planning on setting all of the new transformers, the pad, the equipment, all those types of things, just to try to give an idea of how that's going to look. One of the concerns I have is just that how much fencing do we need there? And then Mr. Repay, how long have we been funding or helping to fund maintenance on this federal project?
Since it's failed in what, 13, I believe is your record, say it. The $300,000 that they alluded to on one of those slides was actually a reimbursement by the federal government, to Lavon's point. When there was the declaration of a federal disaster, they came in and they repaired that. Unfortunately, we thought they were going to repair the entire thing. They just repaired the grates. So that was money that was the federal government. So we've not gotten anything. And as the court usually does when they turn over projects, although this isn't our federal project, it's Griffith's. Once they turn it over to you, as you know, you assume everything, whether right, wrong, or indifferent.
And it would be helpful if however this thing moves forward, whatever type of maintenance plan that would be associated with all this new equipment and the estimates of that, and who's going to pay for that, please. Thank you. All right, gentlemen, sorry.
That question is
Mr. Ochi.
similar to yours, Chairman. Annual maintenance costs, I think you just covered that, but useful life of these rakes, do you have an idea of what the useful life of these things are? Have you have any history of it?
This type of machine should easily last for 25 years. It's a fairly robust
Like
piece
So
of,
the previous ones,
hmm?
like the previous ones.
Well,
25 years is a long time. for something.
yeah,
And the application maybe goes back to the original statement you made. The original ones failed because of design or maintenance or both, a combination of both.
well, I guess in my opinion, I'd say it's probably mostly
Design,
design fault
Okay.
because of the, as I explained.
So can you
the
ensure us
angles-
that this application is going to maintain and provide the intent of this rating system?
Yes, I would, put my
And
reputation
these,
behind
you
it.
said these are in water treatment plants where we have very low current, right? You're basically taking sediment and moving it away from a screen. You said one of the problems with this is you had a major drop off behind the screen. We have added hydraulic pressure at high points in the rain.
Right, well,
Will these things work at that point?
they will. In fact, the installation at Hammond has a much higher velocity than this rack does. It 24/7 basically because of the way that it's positioned in the channel. It's basically at a point where it's falling into their pump station. So it's in a similar kind of arrangement as this.
It would be too much to ask if the engineer of record could write some kind of recommendation that they are stating today that this system will work as intended. Would that be applicable for this thing? Or have we typically done?
Because because it was a federal project, we weren't involved in it. And I don't imagine Andy being involved in it. Because Andy's relatively new, so it would be something that they would have to request from the Corps with because there was always update meetings on this construction meetings. You would have to get anything minutes, documentation and as-built from the Corps, which town may have, but the Corps certainly has because this was a federal project.
Okay.
I don't know, do you have the as-built on how this was done and this? I don't know.
I have some of it, yes.
So that's where you would get it from. But it's just, in the way they do it, the way the Corps does it is they just turn over the project. And, to your point, when they said, the manufacturer said, look, my boom wasn't designed to do this. I'm sort of surprised that they still continued with it, but it isn't surprising that they've done this type of project.
The notes I have on that, Dan, are that, I'm trying to remember the engineer that the Corps had involved with it as well, Black and Beach. According to this manufacturer, they raised those concerns with Black and Beach, with the Corps had, and the Corps said, no, it would work as it is. And I don't know, it's a he said, she said kind
Well,
of
obviously
thing.
it didn't work. Because
Yeah.
you had two other applications.
It has never worked so long as I've been here, and that's almost
So
11
can we
years.
get some kind of letter of guarantee? Not guarantee, but that this system that you're proposing is going to work.
I'd like to see that too.
Obviously, we'll have, some warranties from the manufacturer on equipment and things, but yes, we'll try to.
Yeah, I think they might provide something along those lines. What term of length of time is,
Or maybe we get extended warranty. or something like that.
Anything else, Mr. Oji?
No,
Mr. Nimitz?
Just a few questions. Currently, it gets cleaned manually, either by a backhoe or individuals pulling stuff out. How often does that occur? I understand that you're putting people in harm's way.
It happened, we do
Mr.
it, I'm sorry. We do it weekly. We do it every week. Obviously during major rain events, it's, a lot more time and energy where we're literally down there all the time. So, in June, when we had almost 9 inches of rain, we were there literally almost 24 hours a day, for 3 straight days. And we were monitoring because we had trees, we had tires, we had all kinds of stuff that were blocking that thing. The water was up to the bridge. Like I said, I had only been on the job a couple of weeks. I come in and I'm watching guys and waiters and they're all almost falling under the bridge, trying to get this debris out. got them out of there right away. I go, this is, somebody's gonna crack their head or drown. So those are obviously in a time like now, it's not that bad. But that's why I have an estimate of what it cost us in a range. I had to go back history-wise, anywhere from 45,000 to 100,000, depending on how many major rain events we had.
But anytime you have a major rain event, we have one, you have to man that particular location.
Yes.
I mean, this is definitely a project that working together, thank you for that, that's not easy.
The important thing to remember is that this is an open ditch, so the bag from Menards could end up there, and then as soon as that gets into this grate that they have, which the openings aren't large at all, so everything just compiles. You've got grass clippings, you've got, he said tires, I don't doubt that. Everything will go in here.
So during all the history that we have as far as events, does that continue to be a focal point of concern?
Certainly for that area, absolutely. For us, particularly on the river, it doesn't bother us as much unless it gets blocked and then it sort of shifts the water down to Hart's Ditch. This is designed,
And brings Katy Marsh up, and that brings the Boulevard and Kennedy Avenue into play.
it
And
is designed to relieve the water off of Hart's Ditch technically, and to give it a more of a shortcut.
yeah, that's not working.
Another follow-up, if that's okay, I understand that some apprehension, or I guess what I'm hearing is apprehension to rehabilitate the existing raker based on previous experiences. Which is the lowest cost.
Mhm.
The proposed front clean screen, which is that middle cost, there's 5 different apparatuses. And one of them may fail, or multiple ones may fail at some point during some storm, a big log, something. But the way that it's designed with that front screen is there's no way to bring in a backhoe and scrape those clean. Am I understanding that correctly? So the design is there's an apparatus, a raker on top of the grates currently, would be proposed. And if that failed, there isn't an easier way to remedy that as an emergency.
Well, there is a way, and would not be normal operation, but you
Right.
could actually pull this whole thing is like a big chain, big links. And you can actually pull it all out of the way and get to the rack if something huge were to come in there, like a tree branch that but this machine, there's some videos of it online where you can see like large objects being taken away. Because this whole chain sort of pivots out of the way, and it can pull some very large objects off of there. It's designed for that. So the occasion when that would happen would be pretty rare, I would guess. But in response to your question, could a backhoe still get in there? The answer would be yes. It would just take some effort to do that, to remove something really large if it got stuck for some reason. But like we said, with 5 machines, we've got some redundancy. So, maybe 2 or 3 of them would keep working if a big object came in and blacked 2 of them or something. That, as far as I understand and looking at the hydraulics, I think if you had 3 out of 5 racks clean or being clean during a rain event, you probably still wouldn't have any flooding. It's hard to say with, depending on the rate of rainfall and all that, but, it would definitely, the chances of problems would be a lot less. And that's the other reason for going away from that traveling raker, because it's only one machine traveling up and down, cleaning about a 2.5 foot wide swath at a time. So it has to go back and forth numerous times to clean the whole thing.
But we can't control, or is it set up to sort of control distribution of trash independent of each rack?
Well, not really. It's just looking at the level in the ditch, and as the level gets up, you'll start raking them all. There's nothing wrong with just running this machine. It doesn't consume a lot of energy. It's basically just something you want to stay ahead of things when it is raining.
Yeah. So we would have to get a feel for different rain events and set the level at a certain place.
Yeah, you could do that, but it's such an easy machine and such a low energy use that it's probably better just turn it on and let them run
Okay.
during any kind of a rise in the ditch.
Cool.
Yeah, although I know you, the design is great because there is the redundancy. Of course, there's an added cost because we have to maintain now more, more units as well. But the reliability, it increases our reliability. Okay.
Mr. Wishlinski,
All right, you guys are asking for 1.7 or 80% of that. And you're basing this on basically engineer's estimate numbers. What happens if it comes in over that?
the question is that, you're asking for 80% of the 1.7 based on an engineering estimate. What happens for overages?
So, I guess, I can't speak for, in particular, the town council. I'm sure we would be willing to, pay some portion of the overage, but I can't, give you an exact number and speak for them. Understanding that it was higher, we'd have to discuss that. I'm sure we would, obviously be willing to pay our portion of higher costs.
That's just something to add to the thought process of the
Yeah.
maintenance.
I mean, is it, we're asking basically at this point to fund a certain portion. Would it be better to ask for the engineering at this point and get that done? And I'll follow that up real quick with what's the timetable on, obviously you've done some schematic things to get the final engineering drawings ready to go for a pricing bid.
Yeah, so obviously the preliminary engineering we've been paying for, the town has been paying for to get to this point. Before we wanted to go a whole lot further, we wanted to see if we had a funding mechanism and before we spend a lot more money. And then potentially not do anything. So that's kind of got us to this point. We have talked to the Army Corps as well. And amongst other things that we've talked to the Army Corps about, they, of course, are now our great source of help. And if they did try to tack this on to another project, you're probably looking at the cost going up, 40, 50% higher
If they're involved.
if they're involved. So
And then what's it, assuming that you guys would get a green light, what can we go over just a guesstimate of a timetable here? Engineering, bidding, construction, completion?
I would assume about 3 months of design, 3 to 4 months of design, and then I don't know how long it takes to go through the process here.
Say a year, Tom.
Yeah, 3 to 4 months to get to here, and then I don't know if it were bid through the town, I would assume it would take another month or 2 to get bids. And then, so we'd probably be bidding sometime this year in 2022, mid to third quarter, I'd say.
That'd probably be the earliest. But you may very well be right. I mean, you're probably looking at a minimum of 6 months. Could be anywhere from 6 months to a year.
Okay. Just as a point of reference, as far as the engineering of this deep tunnel, I think the deep tunnel was put in and then we came back a few years ago, Bill, and worked with the town because the increased flow of the water basically washed out the embankments on either side of the old bridge because they didn't account for any kind of riprap or anything. Everything was washed out, and I think didn't we end up, everything's concrete going west from the rack to
Yeah, in the picture, it's all concrete.
yeah.
Was that part
And
of
that
the project we worked on?
Yeah, that was part of the rebuilding of Katy March ditch or Arbogast Bridge because of the increased flow washed out the entire bridge embankment.
We give the town $50,000 to maintain this segment of the system on a regular basis, so long as they pass the inspection. So what they use the $50,000 for, there's really no set hard fast, it just has to be done.
I understand. Anything else, Mr. Wishlinski?
That's all I got.
All right, anybody else, gentlemen?
Yes, I have some questions.
Yes, sir, Mr. Gazdecki.
In your alternative number 3 description, you indicate the trash rack angle would essentially remain unchanged from the current angle, and then you have in parentheses 30. What is the current angle? 30 something?
It's, I believe it's 36.5 degrees. It's some real oddball angle, like, you know. Yeah.
So where it says from the current angle, so it's kind of from the current angle of 36.5 degrees, period, right? Is that what I'm looking at here?
Yes, but there is,
Not
as I
to
mentioned,
60 degrees, we're not changing the
No.
angle.
no, not significantly. We do have to do a couple, we have to raise the top end.
It says 30
About 4
degrees is
inches.
the recommended for your, at least in one of these, in the full SCT system, it says 30 degrees, angle of installation.
Yeah,
It
that might,
also says on the flex rate only, optimum 30 degrees up to 45.
yes, and they can even go steeper than that. So,
So second question I have for you, what is the capacity or the proposed capacity of the first option, the rake itself, and the equipment to modify and put on a new rake? What's the capacity of that rake?
I mean,
As far as pounds?
I don't know what that is off the top of my head. I'd have to look and see what, you know, they don't typically rate these based on the weight of the material they can remove, but. there
What's the
probably is-
largest
there probably
item you've
is
had to
some.
remove from that rack?
They've removed tires, they've removed 55-gallon drums,
So no large logs or anything like that? typically?
large logs. There's videos of, you know, a lot of material that they've removed from these, using these machines. So they're fairly robust.
So you're aware that the capacity of what you're proposing is 1,000 pounds?
It's probably more than that. Is that what it
It
says
says
there?
1,000 pound debris lifting capacity for the flex rake only.
Okay, that's probably because of the limitation of the rake blade itself, because, you know, it's 10 feet wide, basically.
So you don't think that that'll be an issue?
I don't think so. I mean, I've seen what's being pulled off of there now. For the most part, 90% of the time, it's usually this marsh grasses and debris. And it's like, as Dan described, it sort of mats up on the top and then plugs everything behind it, and it just builds from there. Whereas if you're removing it continually, you stay ahead of it.
So but the clearance from the bottom of the rack or the new raking equipment to the top of the screen is 2 inches. How will you accommodate debris that's not 2 inches thick to get caught by the
Well,
upswing?
this machine is actually designed to pivot up away from the rack when large objects come through. The whole thing is that top drive motor is on a big pivot, a swinging
Right.
pivot. So it can actually move up and the chain can actually lift right off. Because the weight, the gravity helps keep this thing down onto the rack. So it doesn't use a sprocket or anything like some types of.
Okay,
mechanical
so
devices.
we have 2 inches, top of the screen here, right, and the bottom of the mechanism. How are you going to accommodate something that's less than 2 inches, like marsh grass, is going to accumulate on top of there?
Oh, no, it doesn't, it engages right onto the rack. So it actually rides on the rack itself, but when there's little or no debris on there, and actually will scrape the bars right up to the top. So
So that will be metal on metal.
it'll be metal, and actually they use metal and then they alternate between metal and
Titanium.
like a high density polyethylene material. So they minimize they're trying to minimize the wear on the rack.
So the bars themselves have some type of Teflon or some type of something,
The
that
rack-
spacers.
The rake blade itself is made of I forget what that material is, a very high density polyethylene material. So that's what causes the slip. And then the rake is actually, or the rack, the stationary rack is actually galvanized steel. So you don't want to scrape that too many
I,
times.
I'm still confused. Are you leaving the existing rack in place?
Yes,
Yes.
So you're gonna be putting this raking equipment that you're showing, do you have your proposal?
yeah, let me show you something here.
Because the equipment I'm looking at doesn't match the descriptive that you're giving me, at least not to me visually.
Okay, you see
I
this?
see gaps
You
there.
see this picture here? Look at the picture and not necessarily the illustration, but that's a picture of the blades that go across, and they are carried by this chain. And there's these rollers on the side, which basically keep the top set of chain links from collapsing down onto the lower. And the reason why they have, like, I think they have 3 rollers there, is basically because they got such a long length of chain. That's the return chain, if you will. And so the one that goes up the slope is the one that actually engages with the rack and pulls the material up the slope and drops it down behind the rack. So those are actually those polyethylene racks, I believe. One's polyethylene, I think, and they got every so often they put a stainless steel one in just to make sure they get a good scrape on the rack. But what happens with these things is
Sir,
what happens with these things is the polyethylene sort of works into the steel, and actually it wears a little bit over time, but it's a fairly hard plastic material.
Mr. Gazdecki?
That answers my question. If you feel that rake rests and travels on the existing bar screen, you shouldn't have a problem.
Where do you see it? It says 1,000 pounds.
Looking at,
hey, Dan,
will we say
Why they
flex
look bad?
rake only? I think if you go to the back of the
is the flow
proposal,
enough for ice not to come on this particular location, or is it ice up there?
I have not seen ice. You've probably seen it more often than I have.
The surface ices, and I anticipated a little bit of that, but we would probably design this one so that the blades wouldn't rest in the water, they wouldn't stop in the water, so that they could continue raking. when
Yes,
they turn it on.
No, but I was thinking if any of that equipment, should you get there, say below the water line when it freezes, it's gonna tear up all your stuff.
Yeah, I thought of that specifically, and I think that we would design it so that the brake blades would not sit down in the water. They would sit either back up the rack or up here,
Yeah.
so that we could.
That's why I like hanging out with Purdue and Rose, Hillman folks, because they work on that kind of math to make sure that we're not tearing up the equipment because of ice, because it freezes here once in a while.
Right, oh, yeah.
Thank you.
We had the same questions and concerns.
Thank you. Any other questions, gentlemen?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Ware.
So here you go, Mr. Chairman. The note says for sites with freezing conditions, a dead plate heat pad and WC heat trace wrap accessories are recommended and not included.
Well, that's for the upper part of the rack, and I don't think that particular statement is applicable in this particular case. Because this thing will run in cold weather. And I think your concern, Bill, was more related to the freezing of the ditch, which does happen. But I was just out there today looking at it, and it's pretty cold today, and it's got an ice skin on top of it. But right around the spillway, there's actually areas where it's not frozen. But in order to accommodate that frozen ditch, I would not want the machine to actually stop in the water. I want to stop it above it, or, so that the blades are not sitting in the water. None of the moving parts are stuck in the water or stuck in the ice.
Understood. Mr. Ware.
On that point, wouldn't there be a gear or a return at the bottom of the rake system that would then be exposed to the water in the wintertime?
No, it's just the rake, or the chain links, if you will. And all of those could be sitting above the water line, the way it is. Because the normal water level over that spillway is only about 3 inches or less during normal times. And when it starts to flow in, obviously the ice is gonna come up, but this thing would scrape right over the ice.
The unit that you mentioned that is in operation, you said at Hammond, how long has that unit been in operation?
Well, that particular one has only been in operation for about 2 years now, so
No issues with that,
no
with
issue.
the customer?
No,
And you said the water flow rate there is higher than what you anticipate or have done, expect here.
oh, yeah, yeah. It rushes through there 24/7.
I'm sorry, I have one more. On the
Absolutely.
maintenance that was discussed about, getting an idea on who will be responsible for the possible maintenance in the future. Do the blades have to be changed after so many hours in operation? Does the manufacturer have recommendations for that?
I don't, they
That
may
part.
have some recommendation on that, but I don't know what it is. I know that this is in a lot of treatment plants where it's running continuously. This would not be running continuously, and they go for many, many years without having to change the blades. I'll see if I can get an answer on that too.
Cool. Anything else, gentlemen?
Yeah, if you could also check on the freezing conditions on the site, and what kind of expense that might entail.
Okay. And I'll send you that video of it removing large.
Just send it
objects.
to me. I'll just
Yeah,
send it.
I'll send it all to you.
I got a quick question.
Yes, sir.
I just heard something
Mr.
at the very
Broadbent.
end there. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just heard something at the very end where you said we wouldn't be running it continuously, but you add the cold weather conditions to that. Would that create a problem with not running it continuously? Like parts, maintenance of parts, just moving parts that aren't running. It might be easier on the maintenance program if it actually is running continuously. So if ours isn't, with our weather, would that be an issue or a concern for you?
Well, we could have it run continuously during wet weather or during freezing conditions, but I don't know if it would be necessary or not.
Okay.
As I said earlier, we could design it to just stop out of the water zone, and so that it's not parked in that frozen pond layer. If you look at the illustration drawing on this particular, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but
Yeah, I actually can.
okay, you see how the water level would be about right here. So all
So
of this.
basically, all the moving
all of
parts
this
are above
thing
the water
out
line.
of the water, basically.
I got you.
So
Thank
but it anchors inside of the water then though, or does the whole thing stay on the actual racking system and none of the supports go into the water itself?
As the rake makes its arc around to the bottom, it'll just about scrape the spillway.
Yeah, no, my question is, sir, is that there's nothing that a pylon or a piling going into the water to support it from the bottom. It's
No.
all supported from the top.
Supported from the rack,
Thank you.
basically.
Mr. Broadnex, you good?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlemen? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, for helping with this and for all the help the town of Griffith gives us in this very important part of the system.
Thank you for your time and consideration.